Good morning, San Francisco. Very good morning and early morning. Good afternoon, London, Croatia, and Cairo. I am in Beirut, and welcome to Beirut Institute Summit E-Policy Circle number 10. And we have a great cast with us today. Of course, Sir John Sawyers, former Chief of the Secret Intelligence Service MI6, former permanent representative of the UK at the UN, where I got the pleasure of knowing you. Of course, right now you are the independent non-executive director of BP Global and executive chairman of Newbridge Advisory. Brett McGurk, who joined us last year at Beirut Institute Summit in Abu Dhabi, welcome to the E-Policy Circle. He is former special assistant to President George W. Bush and senior director of Iraq and Afghanistan, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Iraq and Iran, Special Presidential Envoy for the United States campaign against ISIS under President Barack Obama. He is now a paying distinguished lecturer at Stanford University. Her Excellency Rania Al-Mashat is Egypt's Minister of International Cooperation, former Minister of Tourism, and previously advisor to the Chief Economist of the IMF. And we have Ambassador Yue Cheong-Yung, I hope I didn't butcher that. He's a China Forum expert, former ambassador to Qatar, Jordan, and Ireland. He's director and senior fellow at the Center for Global Studies at Renmin University in China, and he is now in Croatia. He's joining us from Croatia. Welcome. As it goes, 4 minutes to each of you, 3.5 to 4 minutes to bring to the table what you wish. And I will start with Rania Mashat. It's to you right now. Tell us what you'd like us to learn about international cooperation, the dossier that you're holding in the Ministry of Egypt. Please.
Thank you very much, Ragda, and it's a pleasure to be joining such expertise on many topics, and I see everyone has a relationship with the region, and that is extremely important for this discussion going forward. Maybe what I would like to focus on is the concept of multilateralism. Of course, there are so many debates going on. Is cooperation getting weaker? Is everyone on their own? What is the world going to look like post-COVID when it comes to international cooperation and collaboration? And what I want to start saying is that this crisis has shown that no country lives by itself in isolation. What has started as a health issue has actually propagated into economic and social headaches for different countries. Lives have been affected when it comes to livelihoods and jobs. And when we think about every country having sort of a place on the table, what this crisis has shown us that the shared experience, whether it has to do with how to deal with the health situation, or actually how to take policies related to mitigating the socio-economic implications, has been extremely telling. Maybe as we're talking about the region, a few points that I want to highlight. And this is a work that we are doing with Regional Action Group, with the World Economic Forum. It includes public sector representatives from different countries in the region. It also includes private sector representatives, and it includes civil society. And what we talk about is, or what we try to address is the stakeholder capitalism under this, post-COVID. How are countries in the region, how can they engage together to actually overcome many of these obstacles that have happened? And the idea is scaling up the national reactions or the national actions taken by governments, so that this whole debate about are global supply chains being interrupted? Are they going to be replaced by local and regional supply chains? So many of these issues. The first one has to do with accelerating inclusive economies and societies. As we know, many countries have taken fiscal and monetary measures to fend off the implications of COVID. That means that social safety nets have been widened. That means that more vulnerable groups have been addressed. In the case of Egypt, for instance, we have close to 1.5 million workers who are in the informal sector have become more formal. So there are many structural reforms that were on the back burner pushed forward because governments really want to try and see the light after COVID. The second one has to do with fourth industrial revolution. As we see, most of our webinars and meetings today are done through technology. In our case, schools and education were done online. We have a very young population in the region, and therefore they're more technologically savvy than others. And how can we leverage on that? The third point, which is very important, is how we look at environment. Today, with all these fiscal stimulus on projects, how do we ensure that there's a green recovery? In our case, for instance, the projects that are being pushed forward to create jobs and mitigate the implications have to have a 30% consistency with environmental rules. So this is a very important issue, also related to some of the environmental challenges in the region, related to water, related to the desertification, related to the hot weather. So green recovery is something that we are doing in Egypt, but also with my colleagues in the region, other countries are looking at. And the fourth one has to do with regional integration. Studies have shown that intra-trade in the region is very, very modest. You're talking about 16%. If we look at Asia, if we look at Europe, it's much higher. So how can we look at the complementarities between the countries to actually improve that? I will stop there, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rania and Mashat. I'm pretty sure that there will be an engaging conversation on these points that you raised when we open the floor for a conversation, the global conversation that we have in these e-policy circles. I'm going to go now to Sir John Sawyers. To you, please, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Ragida. And I think Rania has, the Minister Mashat has set a very good framework for the economic aspects of this discussion. It is very striking that the COVID virus, when it hit us all, the responses were rather fragmented. They were very national based, and quite often they were competitive. They were closing borders, they were fighting for essential medical equipment and materials. And it was certainly the first crisis in my lifetime where we didn't have the benefit of American leadership. American leadership isn't always a pleasure, but I think when the absence of American leadership is even worse. So I think it's been very striking, that aspect of this particular crisis. And of course, we're only partway through it. We're seeing the numbers of cases around the world continuing to grow on a daily basis. And I'm very concerned in particular for areas with weaker health policy systems like India and Pakistan, or Africa, including North Africa, where the first wave of the virus is only just getting going. But if I look at the Rania looked at the economic and regional aspects. If I look at the more global political and geostrategic aspects, I think we're going to emerge from this first wave of the virus, and I say emerge. We will be living with this virus for the next year or two, I think. So we need to find a new normal with the virus still with us. We can't just wait until the virus is defeated or there's a new vaccine. It could be a long way off. But we're going to emerge from this process more divided and, as Rania says, poorer. There's an economic recession going on in most parts of the world, certainly here in Europe and in Britain. And it's going to make it harder to come together to address the issues that we need to address, whether it's public health or emerging from economic recession or dealing with global trade tensions. But even more difficult from that is, I think, the relationship between the world's two great powers, between the United States and China, has also taken a sharp turn for the worse. A lot of this is attributed to a more assertive approach by the United States on economic issues. But also, I think, and Ambassador Yu, I'm sure will comment on this, and he won't agree with me, but there's been a more aggressive Chinese behavior in the last year or so as well. We've seen it not just on the issue of diplomacy around the COVID crisis, but we've also seen it on the borders with India. We've seen it in dealing with Hong Kong and the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, in the South China Sea, and so on. There's a more assertive China, as well as a more assertive and national United States. And I think as we look forward, the single most important issue for the long term is for the United States and China to find a way of working together which suits both those countries and indeed the rest of the world. We haven't touched on the US elections coming up in November. I think these are going to be very important on a whole range of issues. But one of them will be on the attitude of the United States to its close allies. And it has very good alliances with Europe, with Japan and South Korea, with Australia and so on. And I would hope that with some confidence, if it's a Biden administration, with a bit less confidence with Trump, but still with some hope that, building and retaining alliances becomes a very important feature for the United States over the coming 4 years, more so than it has been in the past. When we look at the Middle East region, I know the Gulf reasonably well, I know Egypt very well. I've been concerned about the impact of the virus in these areas, but the economic impact caused by the collapse of oil and gas prices, there's going to be a lot of strain and stress in the region because of loss of revenue. There's also greater competition between the powers of the region, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Israel, Egypt, and I think that's going to be an issue we're going to have to address in the period ahead. I'll just leave it there. Thank you, Raghunath.
Thank you very much, Sir John. We will definitely touch on all the things that you have mentioned, from the Gulf region to Iran, to the US-China relations and its impact. In fact, you have written a very interesting piece, a very impactful piece in the Financial Times, I believe, in which you pointed out to the closer relations between the US and Europe, in a way lining up against China, provoked by Chinese actions. I'm paraphrasing your words. However, we will also get into the US elections and the impact of that. And speaking of the US, we're going to go to Brett McGurk, whom we have woken up so early in the morning at Stanford University. Please, Brett, 4 minutes to you.
Ragat, thank you so much for having me. It's just a pleasure to be here. I wish we could all be in person as we were last year. I hope we get back to that again. But these policy circles have been so invaluable, and I hope people watch them. I was just watching some of them over the weekend. I think some of the most engaged discussions, really extraordinary, and extraordinary people, such as this panel. Very honored to be here. I'll be brief, but as I'm here in the United States, I think it's kind of elephant in the room is what's happening here. And very uniquely, at least in my lifetime, we are in the midst of 4 interrelated crises domestically. We have this public health catastrophe. I think we have one of the worst responses to COVID in the world, which is, I think, shocking to most Americans. We have an economic catastrophe, which many are living through, but ours is now, thought we were going to recover. It looks like that may now be delayed. We have a racial justice crisis, something our country's grappled with for centuries, is very much upon us again. And we have a governance crisis, just the basic competence of governance. I think the basic questioning of the competence of our authorities at the federal and local level is something that is very much called into question. So all of these interlapping crises at the same time is just leading to a real crisis in confidence. All that said, we are 119 days away from an election. This is going to be a truly historic election, I think the most historic in my lifetime. And if you look at some of the trends in the United States, it seems like there is a mood, a trend to get out of this, just the tumult, and kind of return to some sense of normality, which is what Joe Biden is really running on. So I'm not speaking for Biden, but I'm speaking as an American citizen. And I'm very hopeful, you know, kind of interwoven into our founding documents, we're always striving to be better, a more perfect union. That's very much a moment that we're in as a country. And I think we might actually come out of this in a better place as a country. Now, where does the Middle East, where does our foreign policy kind of fit into that? I think it's conventional wisdom that in terms of the US position in the Middle East, it's not going to have the same priority that it has had in recent years. That's kind of conventional wisdom. I kind of push back a little bit on that. And I just mentioned to people, having dealt with these issues nearly for 2 decades, you know, we may be less interested in the Middle East, but the Middle East is very much interested in us. And I think the old paradigms, energy, Iran, Saudi, all those, that's all there. But the kind of new trend lines, the trend lines that are really shaping the future, not just of 2021, but 2040, 2050, climate, artificial intelligence, technology, shock and energy markets, just fundamental transformations that'll be global, they're all accelerated in the Middle East, and they're accelerated in the Middle East because of the state of conflict, the state of rivalries. So you take cyber, there's active cyber conflicts going on in the Middle East. You take technology. I dealt with this in the ISIS campaign. I'm here in Silicon Valley. There's a debate about the future of war and artificial intelligence. I point out, for a while in the Battle of Mosul, ISIS we controlled the airspace at 30,000 feet. ISIS controlled it at 5,000 feet for almost a week by using adapted drones, off-the-shelf technology. So all of these things in the Middle East move very fast. And if we don't deal with them in a way that develop norms, we could really have a free-for-all. So that's why the Middle East is so important, not only the old paradigms, which are still there, but these trends that will shape the global, the globe really in the next 20, 30 years. They're accelerating in the Middle East. We need to be able to deal with them. But where might we get back to, assuming we get out of that? And I served for 2 years in the Trump administration, so I know it very well. Assuming we come out of this, I just think you look for a return to kind of first principles. And I'm gonna dovetail off what Sir John said. Just the first principles of foreign policy. What is it we're trying to achieve? What are our objectives? And in terms of, once we have a defined objective, what are the resources that will be put towards it, and how will we achieve it? And that means we have to be very clear with our allies of what we're trying to do, get back to the fundamentals, the first principles of alliance building, alliance maintenance, diplomacy, which means persistence, which means compromise. It's hard, but kind of getting back to those first principles. And I think out of that, we can come out in a much better place. This will be difficult, but I'm actually fairly hopeful, even as we're all living through this, these interlapping crises.
Very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate your cooperation, all of you, with the timing, since I'm just waving at you all the time that your time is up. So I'm going to go now to Ambassador Yue Chia-Yong. Please, 4 minutes to you.
Thank you very much. And this Radhika Dahan. Yes, and distinguished experts now, and I believe there are many audience are listening to us. First, I want to thank Ms. Radhika Dahan to invite me for this opportunity. It's really, I'm very happy to share my views as much as I can for the themes we are provided. I also want to concentrate. I think it's very enlightening after hear those experts now, just the opening statement. It's really very forward-looking and very factual finding. I gave the theme of my statement as strive together for peace and stability with common development. This is actually what we China focus to do now, and we have been focusing to do in all these years when we launched the reform and open up, and we are going to focus to do in the years to come for the common development and the common prosperity. And as just now, His Excellency Rania or Marshall has said in the beginning that to do this, we very much hold that multilateralism is really a key as to how we solve all these problems. And there are not much difference with the problems and the challenges now facing humanity now with the COVID-19 and others. And sometimes China, we very much emphasize that we come together, not only in the world, particularly in the region of the Middle East. It's really a very urgent necessity for humanity to unite, to pool collective efforts to maintain global peace, stability, and development. And now, I want to, as an opening statement, I want to share two things we are in China actually we are doing. One is just in the 6th July, we successfully have our, I think it's the 9th China Arab Forum. And in this forum, our President Xi Jinping sent his written message and emphasizing the cooperation and the common purpose. And in this, I should say, the forum meeting, we have quite an impressive outcome documents. For example, we have a joint statement emphasizing how China and the 21 Arab states focusing on the solidarity against the COVID-19. And we have an Amman declaration focusing how politically we support each other for the regional conflicts, for the common issues and the Palestinian issue, and in the time of this so many challenging.
Yeah. Ambassador, I just want to follow up with you on this. Did you just say that you just had an understanding with all Arab countries on how you support each other on regional conflicts? I thought that Arab countries differ amongst each other regarding regional.
The Amman Declaration is we support each other for solving the problems, not for the conflicts, right. And of course. And also we have the execution plan for 2020 to 2022. All this, the execution plan of the forum is for the practical cooperation, ranging from the economic development, recovery from the COVID-19, all the way up to the science and technology cooperation and humanity exchanges. And altogether, we actually have signed 107 cooperation documents in 20 areas.
Thank you very much. I need to move on to other things. It's 4 minutes, it's already 5 minutes. I want to start out with the US elections. And I have a question for each and every one of you, so we're going to have to be crisp and fast with this one. The US elections, of course, the results mean a lot to everybody. For the transatlantic relations, Sir John Sawyers, what do you think? Are they gonna, would it make a difference who wins?
It makes a huge difference. I think these are very consequential elections, as Brett described to us. I think they're going to be important for the direction of America. I don't think a Biden administration would take us back to the land of Obama world, if you like. You can't turn the clock back, but I think there will be a greater emphasis on common problems like addressing the COVID crisis collectively, addressing climate change, as Brett mentioned, and Rania mentioned, and rebuilding America's alliances, which I think is a great multiplier for American power and influence in the world. I think if we see a second Trump administration, it's for Americans to decide, of course, but I think it'll be much more difficult, a much rockier ride for the world, because that stabilizing influence that we've had for the last 70 years will not be there in the to the same degree. And I think also a Biden administration would approach the crucial relationship with China in a way of trying to find common ground and trying to address and resolve issues in a constructive way. Now, whether they would succeed, I don't know. But I think life would be a lot calmer, certainly for America's allies, if we see a Biden administration. And we'd have a chance to address the crucial issue of climate, which I think has been rather been squeezed out of the debate because we've been so focused on the COVID crisis.
So John Sawyers just voted for Biden, I would say, correct?
I don't have a vote.
Yes, well, in virtual votes. We are in a virtual world. Rania Al-Mashat, Egypt, when one would think Egypt would worry if there is a Biden presidency, because there will be a sort of a reset of the relationship to the time of President Obama, which really was not very good to Egypt. I mean, I understand your point about multilateralism and about the necessity of paying attention to climate change, but it seems to me that Egypt was in a very big trouble when President Obama actually reset the relationship in a way that he stepped away from Egypt and the Gulf states and embraced Iran. How do you feel about that? Where do you stand on this?
Egypt's relationship with the United States is very strategic and it's very old. And when we take a look at whether it's cooperation with respect to economic ties, military ties, they're very strategic. They have been there regardless of who's in power or which party rules. This is something that the American people will have to decide. And from where I stand, because we have a lot of work with USAID and we have lots of projects coming forward. So, you know, the economic diplomacy that takes place, these are projects that really affect, you know, different, not just the Egyptian people, but also with the different firms, American firms that also provide this in Egypt. So it's a mutual benefit, actually. So, I mean, again, this is not a decision for any citizens in the world except the Americans. And whatever the Americans are going to choose, all of us will have to definitely move forward and cooperate.
Okay, Brett McGurk, wouldn't you agree that if it's a Biden presidency, it will impact the relationship with countries like Egypt because, of course, of the very nature of the relationship during President Obama, and then if it is in fact Valerie Jarrett, who was the shadow president, as she's called, for President Obama, who is going to be the vice president for President Biden. Isn't it Obama revisited? Isn't that what we should be expecting, specifically in terms of relations with the Arab region, with the Gulf region, and with Egypt in particular? Brett McGurk?
You're on mute, Brett.
You're on mute, Brett.
Sorry, I got it. I have a little toddler running around, so I have it on mute sometimes.
Oh.
I will answer your question, but I also have a question for the ambassador, because I've heard this. I was in Beijing a year or so ago with the Carnegie Foundation and heard the approach to the Middle East from China, and that kind of friends with everybody and trying to solve problems. You're friends with Israel, friends with Iran, which my response was, that's going to be very difficult to sustain because of the very intractable rivalries in the region. And you're going to have to take positions, which I think from what I hear from Chinese officials will make you uncomfortable. And then when you do take positions, again, you're not speaking for the government, but I'm very privileged to be on the panel with you. Just yesterday in the Security Council, China used its veto, which you've rarely done historically, to veto just 2 humanitarian openings in Northwest Syria. So the question is like, why? I think if you a policy that was really focused on solving these problems, at the very least, humanitarian access, given the terrible conflict in Syria, would be something I think we can all support. That said, on your question, look, the Obama era in Egypt and the Middle East was such a tumultuous time. It was a unique moment in history with the Arab Spring and everything that came of it. So I think I'd be very cautious before drawing direct parallels in policies. I think what you will see, though, is a prioritization of diplomacy. And I've just been struck, I dealt with the Libya crisis a little bit in terms of ISIS in the 2014-15 timeframe. I've been just struck by the careening aspect of the Trump administration. When I was in the Trump administration, the policy just shifted like all the way over to the Egypt, Saudi, UAE side of that divide, which is a very fundamental divide. I think very important that we all have to deal with in terms of Qatar, Turkey, UAE, Saudi, and Egypt. And now it seems to be on the other side. And the Trump administration actually has a named policy now in Libya called active neutrality. That's like completely meaningless. That basically means we're going to do very little. So I think what you will see, we have deep strategic relationships with everybody in the Middle East, from Ankara to Doha to Abu Dhabi to Riyadh to Cairo. And I think what you will see is a return to very active engagement, diplomacy, empowered ambassadors. One thing about the Trump administration that is unique, nobody, and I've been a diplomat in the Trump administration, nobody can speak, and I'll wrap, I know you want me to wrap, nobody can speak with authority across the table from a counterpart, whether a friend or an adversary or a competitor, because there's no real policy. And the president shifts on a dime, and everybody knows this. That just makes the basic, to use an American football analogy, the blocking and tackling, the fundamentals of diplomacy very hard. So I think you'll have a return to fundamentals, diplomacy, empowered ambassadors, and trying to manage a lot of these problems that right now are not being managed at all.
I have a question for you a little later, and it's actually from David Petraeus, General David Petraeus, for you, Brett McGurk. I'm going to save it for the next round, but I want to go now to Ambassador Yua. What about a return of what about a second term for President Trump? Does China feel, how does China feel about that? Do you think it's going to make things better if it's a President Biden?
Thank you. Normally, we don't say something about other countries' internal affairs, and since there are some other questions put forward about China just now by Sir John and Mr. McGurk, I will put it together and to give my views. Number one, concerning Sino-American relations, and I happen to be one who is a little bit optimistic. If we try hard enough to bring back these relations to a better course. Of course, it needs the efforts from both sides. Now, a lot of things you see happening in America about China basin, focusing on, to my personal view, is sort of a lot of exaggeration of China's threat. And you can see a lot of rhetoric about how China was doing like Soviet Union, and how China was doing in the technology and in a lot of things. I think a lot of exaggeration there. If you go to China, what China is focusing is really to develop itself and to maintain a peaceful, stable relations as possible with any countries. Number one. Number two, I think for the question just now, Mr. McGurk mentioned about the Middle East. China in Middle East, I think we don't think we are like the traditional powers to come to intervene the internal affairs. I don't know the specific issue mentioned in Syria, but I was I think when last year, Beirut Institute was in your meeting, I think in Abu Dhabi. I was in Turkey when America Trump administration declared withdrawal troops from Syria, and it caused a lot of row between Syria and Turkey. The issue like this, the principle China hold is whatever you do on the regional issues like Syria, refrain from intervening the internal affairs of a sovereign country. The issue like you have mentioned about humanitarian assistance route, if there's something about this is a sovereignty within the Syrian sovereign government, for China, we are not used to intervene like that.
Ambassador Yua, let me ask you a question, a very specific question.
Okay. To impose a solution for Syrian government, we'd rather like to have different parties to talk to each other, to find a solution together. And okay, please.
Yeah, please. Ambassador Yua, the Secretary General of Hezbollah here in Lebanon has been speaking to the public here, including yesterday, to say that China is willing to come in as a partner of Lebanon and of Hezbollah in terms of sort of standing up to the American actions in Syria, including the Caesars Act. Is China willing to risk that in order to uphold Bashar al-Assad in office, or to have this partnership with Hezbollah? Where is China on that? Since you speak of sovereignty, what happens to the sovereignty of Lebanon when you align yourself with a paramilitary force, either it is in Syria or whether it is in Syria or in Lebanon? Can you please respond to the specifics of this question?
That you beat me, and this is very specific. I'm sorry, I'm not very clear about the specifics of this issue. But as I said, China are very careful, no matter it is concerning the Syria or it is concerning the Lebanon. we will never do anything to imposing our solution or imposing our will. We'll also never do anything to intervene the domestic rivalries or problems inside. We are very careful. And if you would like to listen to China's positions from beginning to the end.
But this is very specific, and it impacts a country. It impacts this country called Lebanon that has sovereignty as a state. And there is a party, and that is member of the government, that is saying China is ready to come in to align itself with Hezbollah and Lebanon to make up for what Lebanon needs, while the United States is being pushed out of this country. Is China ready to do that?
How about you send me the question? I will try to find some answers for you after the conference. I really not very clear of what you mentioned, the problem there.
Let me go to back to the question from General Petraeus to Ambassador McGurk. He says, and I'm quoting him, he says to you, Brett, he says, thanks for all that you did over the years and through Republican, Democratic, and democratic administrations. As you look at the fight against the Islamic State now, what are the top 3 big ideas that you would want to share with the US administration that takes office in January 2021? And he said, thanks too. Go ahead, Brett.
Thank you, Dave. Great to see you out there somewhere. Back land.
Inshallah, next year and together. Yeah, go ahead, Brett.
So look, I think the ISIS campaign, I'm writing a book about 9/11 until the end of 2018. But when you really get into the ISIS campaign, given what we faced in 2014 and what we were able to do, I think it was a success. I mean, in terms of 3 things, that's difficult, but where are we right now? I think the threat of ISIS in the 2013, 14, 15 timeframe, this unique phenomenon of more than 40,000 foreign fighters pouring into Syria, training, almost 7,000 Western passport holders able to travel out of Syria into our own capitals, into Europe. That threat has been significantly reduced, and that was always one of the main objectives. In terms of an insurgency threat, that is still very much there. So if I had to boil it down to 3 things, number 1, we need to stay. There's a discussion in the US about endless wars and forever wars. I try to remind people in debates about this. Our presence to counter ISIS was not the same as when Dave Petraeus and I were doing, say, the Iraq War or the Surge. Our resources were extremely limited. We had a military coalition of almost 30 military contributors. Just take 1 year, in 2015, the United States spent about $5 billion total in the counter-ISIS campaign. In 1 year of the surge, we spent almost $150 billion. Our casualties obviously were extremely low. We want to keep it that way. So we need to stay. And stay does not mean forever war. Stay means a sustainable presence that allows us to keep ISIS in check. Second, I think there is a center of gravity in Iraq when it comes to the counter-ISIS campaign in Iraq and Syria. We are in Iraq at the invitation of the Iraqi government. That's something we very much need to maintain. There's a new prime minister in Iraq. He's a good friend of mine. I think there's some potential there, but Iraq is under tremendous challenges. But that is a center of gravity. And third, the coalition. ISIS is not just a threat in Iraq and Syria, it is global. And through this coalition of almost 80 partners, we developed in a pretty unique way information sharing arrangements between military, law enforcement, intelligence. That apparatus still exists. It's really critical. We have stopped attacks from that. And we just need to maintain this. So this is something that's going to go on for a long time. So stay. We need a presence in Iraq. We need a presence in Eastern Syria. Iraq is the center of gravity. Don't forget that. Without the permission of Iraq to be there, we can't be there. And the coalition is really critical. And that takes diplomacy and maintenance and a lot of work. So those would be, if I had to boil it down, those would be the 3 things. Thanks, Dave.
I need to bring in John Sawyers on this and on a couple of other questions that are coming in. But quickly, there's one to you, Alistair. Brett McGurk. It's from Raouf Kubaisi. What is likely to happen to the deal of the century if Joe Biden wins the American election? A quick answer, please.
I have never worked on Middle East peace, so I will leave that to others.
All right. Paul Sullivan sends a question to both, to Brett and Sir John. He says, please comment on the seeming neo-Ottomanism of Turkey and how this will affect the Middle East and politically and economically, in particularly in terms of recovery. And I'd like Rania and Mashhad to come in on that afterwards. Let me start with Sir John first, and then I go back to Rania, and then to Brett, and then we'll take other questions. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you. On Turkey, I think this is an important question. I don't take a conventional Western view on this, because I think Turkey's been had really rather rough time over the last 5 years or so. And I think it's too easy to focus on some of the mistakes that President Erdogan is making, and he undoubtedly is, in terms of the control of the judiciary, the suppression of the media, and so on. It's not an attractive government that he runs in Turkey. At the same time, he came into office and managed to restore democratic structures to Turkey, which had been threatened there. He sought to join the European Union, but was rebuffed by mainly by France and Germany. He has developed, he worked to develop close ties with America, but America provided a home to his biggest enemy, a sort of Ayatollah Khomeini type figure in Gulen in Pennsylvania. Now, I'm not suggesting the Americans returned Gulen to Turkey, but it was very striking when the Gulenists in Turkey tried to organize a coup 4 years ago. There were a lot of people in the West who were silently cheering them on, which I think was very misguided. So I think it's not surprising that Erdogan and his government are very frustrated with the West. They also had to deal with, I'm afraid, Brett, this is in your bailiwick, but the United States' choice to side with a group that the Turks see as a terrorist organization, aligned with the PKK in their fight against ISIS. Now, it's one thing to take on a terrorist organization like ISIS, but the PKK and its affiliates have caused even more problems in Turkey than ISIS have. So it's they've had a tough time, the Turks. You can justify each of these decisions the West has taken, Western powers have taken. But I do think that a big priority for the coming 5 years will be to re-engage with Turkey, between Turkey and the West, and between Turkey and its main regional partners like Egypt and Saudi Arabia.
Except, I'm going to respond with a personal opinion about what you just said about Turkey, Sir John. From the point of view of many here in the region, Turkey has become an incubator, if you will, of extremism, whether it is in Syria, in Libya in particular. There's a lot of anger with what Turkey is doing in Libya. And I know that the minister wants to stick to the economic diplomacy, but I mean, maybe you want to come in to tell us, I mean, how threatened Egypt is by Turkey's behavior in next door Libya. Turkey is also, it is alleged that they are leading the Muslim Brotherhood movement to overthrow governments in Egypt and Tunisia, and that's the project of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. So how worried is Egypt about what Turkey is doing in Libya and its project within the North, let's say North Africa altogether? Rania al-Mashhad, is that something you can talk about?
I think that would be a question for our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Military. So in your next policy, maybe they can join you and respond to that. But I enjoyed the debate between you and Sir John.
I see. On whose side are you on? I am battling. I'm wrestling with Sir John. Are you with him or with me?
I'm. It's the first time for me to see both of you, so I'll keep my preferences for later.
I think, Raghuda, just to come back before you go on to press on this issue, I think on Libya, there was an international process to support a government in Tripoli. And that was undermined by a number of countries who decided to support a sort of a military figure who wanted to be a sort of successor to Colonel Gaddafi. And it was curious, I thought, that so many countries came out and undermined the United Nations process, and France was one of them, and for a brief while, the United States was another.
And the
So,
UK as well, Ambassador, if you remember, the UK, it was everybody who danced in the Security Council, including Ban Ki-moon, I guess. I mean,
yeah, but I think my general point here is that if the international processes, like in the UN, are not supported by all the countries of the region, then you're bound to find this dealt with by people backing different sides of a civil conflict. And I don't think Turkey was the first country to be involved in that.
Yeah, I have to go back to Ambassador. You were at one point, but Brett Magog, I need you to address, please, this issue of Turkey and whether it is an incubator of extremism or even terrorism, as some think. What's it doing in Syria and Libya as well? And I want to combine this. I know it's a different story, but try to address the same question with the Taliban militant story and the consequences to the US-Russian relations, because this is a big issue that is going on. Are the Taliban militants the new ISIS? Can you address these questions together as briefly as you can before we go into the US-China relations, if we can get a little more on that?
Yeah, if I open up too much on this, I'm just gonna, it'll take up all the time. Look, I'm from I went to the School of Hard Knocks on Erdogan. I first met him in 2007 with Condi Rice. We dealt with him a lot. I probably spent more time in Turkey as a diplomat than any other country, going in and out of Ankara. I take some issue with Sir John that it was a conscious choice in terms of the YPG. We tried everything with Turkey to close that border, even after the Paris attacks, even after the Brussels attacks. When we really went all in on the other, it was after probably a year and a half of trying almost everything else, hundreds of millions of dollars. I can go through the whole story. So, and a lot of that was working with the Turks and trying to control that border when tens of thousands of people were pouring in and out. And right now, I think if you look at what Turkey's doing, I think there is some reason for concern in the region that we hear and read about. But moving just even into northern Iraq right now, they have an operation in northern Iraq right now that is qualitatively different than what they've done before. And they have legitimate security concerns. I have on the record about that, no question. We should help them with that in all sorts of ways to make sure that they are very much protected. But they are moving in a very significant way into Iraqi Kurdistan. And the spokesman for the Iraqi Peshmerga has said, Turkey's moving 40 kilometers into our territory as Iran is moving 10 kilometers into our territory in the east. This looks like a coordinated effort. And having dealt with the Syria file for so long, we tend to have an assumption that Turkey's kind of on our side of this. But in fact, especially since 2015, 2016, the Russia-Turkey coordination on Syria when it comes to the US presence is something we have to watch very carefully. And I'm seeing the Russians start to encroach on our presence in eastern Syria as the Turks move into Iraqi Kurdistan, and they're starting to move towards what is really our main supply line. I think this isn't an imminent crisis, but it's coming. So just something to keep an eye on. But the bottom line, coming from the US perspective, Turkey's a NATO ally, they're a vital ally. We have to be engaged with them. We should not take sides in this regional divide. We should try to use diplomacy to maintain it so things don't spiral out of control, and use our good offices to good effect. So with that, I think I'll leave it there. On the Taliban story, this is really a significant issue of domestic politics as it gets to just the competence of the president in terms of doing his job. I think if there's intelligence in the president's daily brief, even if it's low confidence, moderate confidence, that Russia might have a policy to target our forces, which would be a sea change. I mean, Russia supports proxy groups and things, but to directly target each other, that's kind of a no-no. And that would be something the president would need to know about, especially when he's on the phone with President Putin multiple times, 5 or 6 times after this period. So it's kind of like a shocking story here. What it does to overall Russia-US relationships, look, it is a fraught relationship. It's a fraught relationship because of the policies of Russia and in terms of how those things converge from Syria and all over the place. There's also areas in which we need to work with the Russians on. And this era of great power competition truly is competition. I think we have to work with Russia in a number of areas. We have to, in some ways, we have to deconflict and coordinate them on Syria. I led the Russia channel for a number of years on Syria. But we also have to be very clear about what they're doing and draw lines where lines are necessary to be drawn. And that's what I fear is not being done right now.
Thank you very much, Brett McGurk. Ambassador Yue, can you please tell me about the China-India clashes, recent clashes? Are they, from your point of view, have they been contained, or are they ready to be flare up again? Has there been any sort of fundamental attempt to contain this very dangerous development?
But to answer this question, thank you. To answer this question simply, that it is contained, and actually both sides have very good meeting, and you know, I think this incident is really happened in a very what to say, critical time. But for China, we didn't expect it would happen. So after that, we quickly contact our Indian partners, and we had a very good meeting between Wang Yi, our state councilor and foreign minister, with the Indian National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval. And they reached a 4-point agreement. Simply to say, to summarize these 4 points is to say both sides agree to bring down the tension and maintain the status quo, and also both sides to reduce the tension and withdraw the troops from the border areas. We have a very good, both sides. We are confident that this border will not be flaring up like some media have said. And this mechanism is from the military commander to the representatives of the security on both sides and foreign minister. The mechanism has been working for all these years. So if you check up the policy briefing, the briefing from our foreign ministry, the situation now is coming down. And we also have the mechanism and dialogues, both from the political side and the military side.
Ambassador, as you heard, some countries are accusing China of opening too many war fronts, and I'm not talking about actual war as in military engagement necessarily. As you know, there's been quite a number of criticisms of that Sir John mentioned, and that the FBI director also spoke of recently. So why is China opening so many war fronts? Is it on purpose, or is it because of a lack of coordination? Is there any way that you could explain to us why is that happening? And are you worried that this might impact or affect or impede your Belt and Road initiative?
Thank you for the question. I think the metaphor of the war, if that metaphor is appropriate, it is the war not from China, it's from somebody else. And China is purely personally, I feel very strange. Why all these talks about this, like China is doing something. If you say China doing anything, China is just react and defend its own interests by explaining that we are continuing to go along the peaceful path of development. We are continuing to practice our cooperation with win-win approach with any countries, including America, Europe, Middle East, and the developing and the developed countries. So from China's perspective, we saw a very positive picture of the world, which is quite different from what you have mentioned. FBI Director, Mr. Mayer, I heard his presentation in Hudson Institute. He exaggerate quite another picture. And he very weakly to compare China from somebody else, which anybody in the world can immediately say that is rubbish. And he will continually to say this. I think in his presentation, questions are very well asked from the Hudson Institute to him to say, what is the exchanges, normal exchanges? What is the normal cooperation? And from that, I think I come back to Sir John's question, if you would like me to
no, we
say a few words about his said, both America and China looks assertive a little bit, like a big power rivalry. I think the same, to the same effect.
Please, can you do that in like 30 seconds, Ambassador? We're running out of time. 30 seconds, then your last.
I share another 10 minutes, 10 seconds to you. I think assertive is not a quite appropriate word. It is the situation for me personally. Last year I went to America to have like a second track dialogue with American friends and partners. Sometimes as you sit down there with some Trump administration people, they don't wait for you to say anything. They bombarded with all the accusations and all the words of the very, very militant. And they wouldn't wait for you to explain. So that's a different picture. But we are not worried. I think this is, we still think this is some people there, maybe they have their own domestic political agenda, they have their own political ideas, but I always believe that American people, American different walks of life, they believe the facts, they believe the figures, and if they see what is China really practicing in our peaceful foreign relations and cooperation, they will believe, they will know.
I have to cut you off. I'm really sorry. I apologize.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
Wait, stay. We have not said goodbye to everybody. I apologize to you, Madam Minister, because I'm sorry I brought you into this discussion and you did want to talk about international cooperation, and I've been very unfair to you. Can you take a couple of minutes, please, and like a minute, if you don't mind, to just tell us what do you hope international cooperation would look like in the next stage?
Yeah, thanks. I think there have been many lessons over the past few months, and the key lesson is humility. There's not a single country who has been able or has not suffered from COVID and from the implications, whether health or socio-economic, and it's still ongoing. And when there's humility, it fosters collaboration. So I am in no doubt that the period ahead is one where there is more engagement. In our case, or in my case, we create multi-stakeholder platforms where we discuss with all partners of development, multilateral and bilateral, sectoral priorities for us going forward. And this really pushes the cooperation between countries. Egypt has very strong relationships, and I'm very happy that I'm in the economic diplomacy, because from the discussion today, there's so much going on. And I've enjoyed the different debates here, and thank you for inviting me. And I think the last word I want to say is, in my different, I come from the region, I've been brought up here, geopolitics of the region keeps on evolving and changing, but that's our fate. But nonetheless, I'm very proud that I'm in government. I'm able to contribute, representing a generation that is looking forward, and hopefully through economic diplomacy we can bridge gaps, and we can create more consensus rather than conflict. Thank you very much.
I thank you very much, and I really apologize to you for having that little time to discuss the multilateralism that you wanted to address. My apologies to you. Next time we will have you on and we'll talk about multilateralism. This leaves us with about 30 seconds to each, Brett McGurk and Sir John Sawyers. Go first. Who's going to go first? Go Brett, and last word to John Sawyers. Go Brett McGurk. 30 seconds.
My last word, just kind of to sum up what I began with, we have these multiple crises: public health crisis, economic crisis, governance crisis. The one thing we don't have right now is a true international security crisis. And I think I'm hopeful we don't have one, particularly heading into our election, because I think we have so many problems. But if history is telling, I think there's a decent risk there will be one. And there may well be one in the Middle East, just in terms of Libya and what we were talking about, Turkey. We could open that up in terms of a very potential, very serious flashpoint if the Turkey-backed forces move on CERT, other things. So, but that is the one crisis that is not on our plates, and hopefully it'll remain that way.
How about Iran, Brett? Are you thinking that there may be a clash US-Iran before the elections?
I would not put it past the Iranians to do something. I think the UN is now determined, which is everybody knows, that they launched the attack on Saudi Arabia 6 or so months ago. So again, I would not put it past my experience with the Iranians. They follow our domestic politics extremely closely. So I think they are probably calculating, and there may well be an incident. I think it's something we need to watch very closely. Thank you very much, Brett McGurk. John Sawyer?
Just as a final word, I think what this COVID crisis.
Yes. Comment on this Iran clash, potential clash.
Well, on Iran, we've talked a lot about the American elections, which are obviously very important. For Iranians, there's an even more important election, and that's their own presidential election next year, which may not only determine the succession to Rouhani, but also the succession in time to the supreme leader. The Iranians are under huge pressure at the moment, caused by the US sanctions, and these could be intensified ahead. But my own sense is the risks of a clash in the Middle East have gone up, but I think the Iranians will probably be relatively calm in the same way they were, to my surprise, after the killing of Qasem Soleimani. And that's on Iran. Perhaps more widely, Ragida, if we're just wrapping it up.
Seconds only, please. Yeah.
I think what this COVID crisis has done is shown the importance of competent government. And that's something which Brett was mentioning earlier. Those governments that were elected on the basis of ideology or in reaction to popular anger have actually performed very badly in this COVID crisis. I think if we can return to competent government, if we can have an American administration that reaches out and works actively with partners and restores American leadership, and we have a Chinese government which sees that actually confrontation and suppression inside the country is not a net benefit for China, and that there's a way forward which doesn't require China to take those sorts of approaches, I think I would be optimistic about the future. But each of those three things have to fall in place.
All right, I'm going to have to thank you very much, all of you, and I'm going to have to tell you quickly who are the guests for the e-policy circle number 11 next Wednesday, July 15. I will have no time to give the background. I'll just say the names. Former Minister of Libya, Mohammed al-Dairi, Ambassador Ryan Crocker. You all know who he is. He had so many positions, and I'm very happy that he's going to be with us. We have Lady Olga Maitland from the UK, and we have Irina Izbigileskaya from Russia. We will please follow us on our social media to know, and Beirut Institute channels to know the background of everybody, and to join us next week at the same time. I am most grateful to all of you for making this an amazing conversation. Forgive me if I wasn't fair to everyone, but the subject, it seems geopolitics always wins against economics and policy and diplomacy. Forgive me for that, but thank you very much, and have a good afternoon, good evening, good day. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.